And see, here's another example of this buried hidden crap. This guy Eads says, I'm going to get a clue out of you. How big has it gotten? How big has the entire phenomenon gotten? I know there have been hotels in Laredo. I think that when one of your clues came out, they ran a treasure hunter special and filled the hotel. I mean, you're doing a lot for business in Santa Fe. Fenn goes on to say, well, that's right. He got a beautiful little, he got something, some sort of an award. Fenn then says, just off the cuff, they're talking about Santa Fe, and Fenn goes, Yellowstone Park had more visitors last summer than any other year in their history. And Eads goes, here's a smart guy. Here's a guy who's done his homework, right? Fenn, out of the blue, says, by the way, Yellowstone's having a really big year. And I thought that's interesting because they're talking about Santa Fe, and Fenn just says, well, Yellowstone's having a really big year last summer, too. And this guy goes, why Yellowstone? Why? This is what Fenn has to put up with. Can you imagine? I mean, he spent every year of his formative years, every summer, 3 months every summer of his formative years in Yellowstone, a place he professes to love, I think, more than any other place on Earth. Can't believe the treasure would be there. Don't know why I wasn't looking there to begin with, but I had my reasons for going to Colorado. I don't know. Because I follow the voices in my head. No, I follow the clues as I find them, and sometimes I find clues later that other people have known about for the last 10 years. Go figure. Or 8 years, or 9 years, or whatever it is. So now I do believe it's Yellowstone, but Fenn goes out of the way. Why Yellowstone, Mr. Fenn? Because that's where I grew up, and a lot of people think the treasure is buried. He can't stop doing it. Is hidden someplace there. I've said that. And Eads brilliantly says, Yellowstone National Park? I'm not picking this up. He says that. He's not even on the same page. He's still going, you're in National Park of Yellowstone? God almighty. These are people getting paid to interview people. And they can't even, I mean, they were more out to lunch than some guy in the street doesn't even know about the poem. I think most of us know Yellowstone would be yeah, okay. Then the next one says, here's Fenn again saying, I've never said it's buried. What I've said is that I hid it. That's not to say it isn't buried. Forrest. Is Forrest confused this or what? He said it's not hidden in his yard. Oh, because people were coming to his house, so he makes an issue of saying it's not buried in my yard. Or hidden in his yard. He made that clear, too, on this one. It's not buried. Be great. All right. It was one of the first interviews he ever did. It was Report from Santa Fe with Lorraine Mills, 2011. Fenn says, there's a good quote in the new Devine book, and it says, they never knew it was the chase they sought and not the quarry. Isn't that interesting? I'm like, kind of, I'd rather have the treasure than the chase. I mean, honestly, if Forrest Fenn called me up and said, look, I'm just going to tell you where it is, but, you're going to have to skip the next 10 trips you may have planned that you're going to spend your time and effort and money on. What do you want me to just tell you where the treasure chest is? Hell yes. Just tell me where the treasure chest is and I'll go and get it. Forget this chase crap. I don't I'll go chase something else like I don't know, but it doesn't matter because no, the chase, I'd rather find, if I could find the treasure without the chase, I would. I'm sure that goes against Mr. Fenn's kind of code of the allure of adventure or something, but let's be honest. I mean, serious. She goes, oh, yes. Speaking of the Devine book. Now, someone else on the internet, it was kind of funny. This must be what they were talking about, because he said, did anyone know that when in the interview where Fenn says, have you seen, there's a new quote in the new, there's a good quote in the new Devine book. When he said that in 2011, this guy said, that book had been out for 10 years. when Fenn said that. It's kind of funny. So he says they never knew it was the chase they sought and not the quarry. Isn't that interesting? And Lorraine Mills goes, ah, yes. Fenn says, in the art business, I'd love to find a great painting. But there was a letdown after I found it because the chase was over. Anybody can sell a great painting, but not everybody can find one. So the thrill was in the chase, and I loved that. Still do. Mills says, the inevitable. So at this time as we speak, you have buried, it is buried. You have placed a treasure chest somewhere in the mountains north. You have placed a treasure chest somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe. And Fenn, now she just said, so at this time as we speak, you have buried, is it buried? You have placed a treasure somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe. And what does Fenn say? I never said it was buried. No, he doesn't. He says that's right. And she says, and it is in an 11th century box, at least describe the treasure chest. Okay, and then he goes on to discuss that it's an 11th century Romanesque Bible box or a box of letters, and it's a beautiful box. Okay, the last thing I have to say about this is from Bruce Hill. Again, this is for the Santa Fe National Forest. If this treasure is buried, you would need to dig for it, and you can't dig anywhere in a national forest without a permit, said Bruce Hill, spokesman for the Santa Fe National Forest. Even if it is not buried, why did I read this last? Why am I always doing this? I'm always reading things last. It collapsed my entire... He then says, even if it is not buried and it is just placed somewhere, it becomes public domain. Even if it is... This is the only time, now this was 2013, this is the only guy I've ever known to say, if this treasure is buried, you would need to dig for it, and you can't dig anywhere in a national forest without a permit, said Bruce Hill, spokesman for the Santa Fe National Forest. And then he adds a caveat that I'm not sure is right. Even if it is not buried and it is just placed somewhere, it becomes public domain. But he doesn't explain what that means. He says definitely you can't dig it up, but he says if it's not buried, it becomes public domain. Maybe he explains it on the next page. Ditto for state lands, according to Department of Game and Fish spokesman Dan Williams. Forrest Fenn was asked if he had considered land rights before hiding the chest. He said in an email that much has been written about land laws. I'm staying out of those discussions. Wait a minute. I'm staying out of those discussions, except to say it may be fun to redefine some of the terms, Fenn said in the email. That's real helpful. Has Forrest Fenn ever thought of running for office? He could literally have us believing something's buried and not buried at the same time. All right, so we've established two things today. One, that puffins are hilarious to watch. You see your little feet? I just enjoy watching their little feet. Now, when you see them at feeding time, it's ridiculous. It looks like a whirlwind. You always see these bubbles because they come diving in and diving out, and they're going crazy and fighting, and it's crazy. But just their average peaceful day, you see those little feet, and sometimes they get confused and they go in a circle. Or one time, this one dude was shaking his left leg real heavy, for a while. I thought, man, that puffin is having a problem. But then he stopped. I guess he just want to shake it. Shake it, don't break it. It's an expression from way back in the 80s. Or 70s. Shake it, don't break it, mama. Break it, don't shake it. shake it, don't break it. Anyway, did that help? I don't think it's buried, okay? I think it's on top of the ground, and I think it has stuff over it. And I think that's why Fenn talks about redefining terms and such. I firmly believe common sense tells me if anybody can go online and read the simple fact that you can't bury things in the national parks and forest, if all of us could do that easily, I don't think Fenn would have been told by his lawyers, yeah, go bury it. Now, why Fenn goes out of his way to say it's not buried or is buried, but he doesn't want to say it's buried because he don't want to give out that clue, or he won't say it's buried even though it might be buried, but it's not buried even though it isn't. You know what I mean? I mean, that's not confusing, is it? I don't think it's buried. I think it's sitting on top of the land, and I think it probably has detritus on it. We saw, if you've seen my treasure chest sim, you know, we go out in the forest and we throw it in the weeds and throw the box here and there, my simulated treasure chest, and it's going to be a etch to find it if it's got crap on top. Is it in fact then buried? That is an issue for him. He's sitting there going, well, I don't know, maybe it's buried then. Maybe it is. Maybe legally it's buried. You know, really, that's a good thing to consider, right? That is a really good thing to consider. If you come across it and it's got all sorts of detritus on it, and you have to move that detritus, you're in a national forest, we'll say, to get that chest. Here's what I'm going to do, folks, and I suggest you do the same thing. Just take the chest. Don't go to the park superintendent. I agree with this guy earlier who said, if it's mine, why am I involving a park superintendent? If it's found on top of the ground, why is a park superintendent even need to be involved? I don't mean to tell people to break the law. I'm going with the thought that if in fact something is not buried, it is what 90% of the people that seem to know said, that know park superintendents and stuff seem to say. This one guy was the guy at the very end, it never fails, who said, well, it's still going to be public domain, but he doesn't follow up and say, and you can't take it. He just says, well, it's going to be public domain. All of the other people say, including him, you can't take it if it's buried. And then if it's not buried, they're all kind of like, That tells me if it's not buried, just take it. I'm saying that because I'm thinking that's the right thing to do legally. You're supposed to technically go to a park superintendent and give it to him so he can call Fenn and determine that yes, this is his treasure chest, that yes, he's going to bequeath to you if you find it. I don't know. That just seems, I don't know. So what have we learned here today, kids? Virtually nothing. No, I've learned that I don't think it's buried. I think it's sitting on the ground. I think it's a very good possibility. It's got a lot of stuff on top of it, and I believe that it's in Yellowstone Park. I think. I mean, let's face it. If it's buried, don't we pretty much know that we're never going to find it? If the treasure chest is truly buried, literally, he dug a hole and put it in and covered it up, I don't think we'll ever find it. Ever. Ever. And on that positive note, I would like to end this video series. So, glad to have confused and muddied the waters even more. I'm not sure I'm any closer than I was. It's almost a percentage thing. He seems to... Because, see, I picked on the things where he said he could bury it, or he buried it but didn't bury it. He hid it, but he's not going to say he didn't bury it. The vast majority of his quotes, he says he did not bury it. It's just like in the vast majority of quotes about Brown they're about brown trout. If you study Fenn's talking about brown, do a search on brown. It's mostly all brown trout, which tells me that probably brown refers to trout. But then you get into whether, I'm not even going to go there. It's a whole other subject. Hope everyone's having a good day. And see you later. Don't let the puffins kick you on the way out.